So we'll start in a second. I thought I'd better say something about the program for the rest of the retreat. We're coming really to the end of the retreat. Let's visit the shrine before. I just noticed it in the Zoom box. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namo. Namo Namo. Om. Yeah, so I thought I'd say something a little bit about the program. I haven't actually got very much to say today. Usually that's about, in the old days when we used to have order reporting in, if someone said, I haven't got much to say, you used to get your packed lunch out. Because you thought, oh no. I remember it became famous. If anyone said, I haven't got much to say today, you think, okay. Packed lunch, flask, sandwiches. Hopefully that doesn't happen now. So tomorrow, so we've got a final talk proper tonight, really, concluding our quite hopefully in depth, but still quite brief exploration of the three myths. Personally, I found it really helpful for my own thinking, to be able to think with you about the myths. Both Yonavatra and I think, are both extroverted thinking types. So I do my best thinking when I have to think out loud. So often until I speak out loud, I don't know what I think. I'm a typical extrovert in that way. So for me, it really helps me think. And Yonavatra and I are planning to write this book on this material, and for both of us it's really helped us think more about the issues. Personally, I think it is very important. Going back to what I said at the start, I really felt that talk of Subhuti's in 2003 was incredibly prescient, and I remember at the time thinking this is really important material, and being a little bit surprised that other people didn't necessarily see it like that. So tonight we'll conclude with our talks proper, as it were, with Yonavatra, exploring more about the emergence element of self-discovery. And then tomorrow morning at 10:30, what we thought we'd do was we'll have just a few summing up remarks, not very many, not a talk, just a few summing up remarks. Then I thought it would be good to very briefly hear from everybody, particularly on the Zoom call, how you found it, what's been helpful. We won't have very much time for that because, well, we just haven't. And then we'll finish by doing a short ritual and dedication. Yeah. So my guess is that we'll start at 10:30 as usual, and it'll probably be till about 11:30, my guess. See how it goes. It might not need that amount of time, it might need a little tiny bit more, but that's to plan for. We thought originally we'd have another talk, full talk tomorrow. We will have some things to say tomorrow, but not. I don't think any of us need another full talk after tonight. I don't mean that. Tonight will be like wonderful, and you'll be like, the amount of times I put my foot in it, I can tell you. I shouldn't be allowed to go anywhere, but anyway, there you go. There are so many stories about me putting my foot in it with my mouth. Yeah, go on, tell some. There's so many. There's lots of them are very funny, but they all involve me saying things that I shouldn't have said. I'd be like one of those reverse politicians that says stupid things all the time and everyone thinks it's very trustworthy, only to find out later on that they have just said really stupid things. I'd be one of those. There's a whole brand of politicians like that now. I think I've got a new career ahead of me. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so we'll have some short remarks tomorrow, a short reporting out, as we used to say, and a little ritual to finish. The other thing that I was thinking is that we've touched on the three myths, particularly what we wanted to do is look at them from a meta point of view. I don't mean in the sense of Maitreyabandhu, but in the sense of from above, you know. And we've been wanting to really explore the Lakshanas. There's quite a lot to do in the week. A lot more to explore with the Lakshanas. We haven't talked, for instance, very much about how to practice it in life. We've mostly focused on meditation, and I think that's fine, but we haven't done much about that. All I thought I'd say today myself is a little bit more about how one might put all this together in a, you know, I'm always, when I was leading the Gukaloka course, you know, I'm very aware, you know, you lead mindfulness breathing, Maitreyabandhu, then we explored obviously the 6 element practice, then sadhana. At one time we used to do the prostration practice as well. And then you're very aware when you're leading that 4-month retreat that most people, when they get home, they'll be doing 1 meditation a day. Most people that I know, actually some newer people to the center are doing much more than that, but most people I know are doing 1 meditation a day. So that's very precious time. I'm very grateful to Sadhloka for leading the morning meditations, because for me that's very, very precious time. That doesn't get, you know, there's a particular time, isn't there, for meditation, and for me that's very precious time. And so, as I was saying this morning, how I generally try to do it is sort of do this arc of sadhana. I don't know whether that'll be useful for you or not, but as I said this morning, and actually often I don't do the samadhi part of it for the reasons I've explained already. Sometimes I do, not always, but I have you know, the arc of sadhana would be, you know, settling, a little bit of samadhi practice to soften and enrich your mind, mindfulness, you know, mindfulness of breathing or Maitreyabandhu or some kind of softening, enriching practice. You know, that we haven't talked very much about the samadhi. We only did that one down it, but we're not trying to say by that it's not important. It's very, very important indeed. So I start sometimes with that, and then I take up one of the reflections. That's what I've been doing for the last while now. Sometimes I just go through all of them. You know, I do anicca one day, dukkha the next, anatta the next, anicca the next day, and so on. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I focus on one more than another, or 2 more than another. But I take up one of the reflections as my spiritual death practice. And then I go on to the sadhana. But what I thought I'd add from this morning was, in my meditation, and this is only me talking personally, the amount of time I give each element of it, of that arc of sadhana that I was explaining this morning, depends. Like more recently, I've been spending a lot of time on reflecting on the Lakshana, and then at the end of the meditation, I am meeting Padmasambhava, just opening that up to meet Padmasambhava. And often that's a much smaller part of my meditation. Sometimes I extend that part of meditation of the sadhana and do much less on the Lakshana and Samadhi. So I think you're wanting all of those elements in. I would have thought that's what I'm wanting. Samadhi experience, a real exploration of spiritual death. Personally, I think that's what I was missing in my meditation practice. Just again, to be a bit conventional, I've never really got on with the 6 element practice. I have when I'm at Gukaloka. I've had it led now by Vajrashura, by Satyaraja. And I was able to get into the sixth element practice there. And I know many order members do. I know Satyaraja, it's really his main practice in many ways. Personally, I've never really managed to get into it. Again, it's not because I don't think I should, or that it's not important, or because I don't have any problem with it as a practice. I think Bhante is right and so on. But I myself haven't done it. When I was ordained, the kind of advice that came through to me was do your sadhana every day. It would be good to do sixth element practice regularly, but only if you're in an emotionally positive enough state. And that soon became only when you're on solitary retreat. And then I didn't do it on solitary retreat. That's how I took sixth element. I'm pleased to see that we are exploring six elements much more. There's been much more emphasis on that recently, and there's more thought about how do we introduce that, when do we introduce that. But certainly in my own taking up of the sadhana, it became, okay, do the sadhana. If you're in a really good state and on solitary retreat, do the six elements. And of course, I just didn't do it. So I've never got into, any practice needs a lot of bedding into, doesn't it? A lot of exploring, a lot of working out what's literal and what's not. First, you nearly always do any practice, mindfulness of breathing, metta sadhana, in a slightly clunky and literal way, if you see what I mean. With the sixth element, you do all of those 8 reflections, if 8 for each one, it's quite clunky. So I never practiced it ongoingly enough to settle into it and know my own instincts around it. So what I ended up with was a sadhana practice without very much, with hardly any spiritual death in it. And the vision of shunyata just wasn't that for me. It was a blue sky. I never found it very easy to translate that into a spiritual death, do you see what I mean? So, this might just be my personal experience, and you might be just saying, well, I've never had any of those issues. That's good for you. But so for me, what these reflections have brought in is a much clearer, much more, for me, much more emphatic practice of spiritual death. You are now taking up the lakshana of anatta. You are now taking up the lakshana of dukkha. Some people have been doing that with 6 elements, doing the 6 elements before their sadhana, or an abridged version of that. But personally, I don't feel that the blue sky is enough. It needs to be deeply reflected on in direct experience, not merely imagined. And I think I sort of thought that merely imagining a blue sky very vividly would kind of be enough. And that merely imagining a man with 3 colored robes and a katvanga would weirdly, in a way that I couldn't have explained, have sort of done the job itself. So I think I was very much missing a spiritual death element, possibly because of my own sort of history and so on. But I think, we need, at best, to try and have an integration practice and a positive emotion practice. But when you get ordained, you're really explicitly committing yourself to spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. And I think that does need to be explicit in one's meditation practice and in one's life. And it would be good if somehow, as time goes on, we could find ever more skillful and useful and practical ways of bringing spiritual death and spiritual rebirth much more as living forces in our life, not just in our meditation, but in our life. And it'd be lovely if more of our interactions were properly focused on that, not this awful pretend version of it where someone points at you and says, "Where's yourself?" and all that sort of thing, which, makes you want to yawn. But some genuine exploration of, how do we die to things and how are we reborn? So I think for me, that's what I've been doing anyway. What I find is you can extend any part of it, spend a long time doing samatha practice and then a little bit of spiritual death and then just the evocation of the figure. Remember that the key thing with the yidam is it's a meeting with them. You don't need to see them. You don't need to say their name. You've got the key thing is that meeting. For me, I'm afraid the image I go back to is the Annunciation, shorn of Christian Christianity, but it's that meeting with the Archangel Gabriel. It's being in that place of feminine. I hope I can use that word. Purity, virginity in the metaphorical sense, not to be mixed up with the literal sense. That when you see the best enunciations, they're images of what I'm trying to get to in meditation, where I'm really open. I'm really embodied. I'm really wanting reality to imprint itself upon me and give birth to a new life. That's so we can kind of extend different elements of it, whichever you need. But surely, in principle, we're needing to find samadhi, spiritual death, and spiritual rebirth, and then some kind of way of, and we haven't even touched on this, how do we take the sadhana into our life? In a certain sense, we need to take something to the sadhana. We need to engage with the sadhana, not as a deva worship, but what we're taking into it, and what do we take from the sadhana into our life? What is it about the myth of the sadhana, whether it's Madhugosha or Padmasambhava or whoever, that you're trying to embody in your life? And how is that going to come from your sadhana into your life and then fed back into your sadhana? If you see what I mean? We haven't touched on this, but I do think that's really, really, really important. So I've been very struck with Padmasambhava and demons, of course, it's one of his main symbols. So there's something about transforming those darker energies. I need to do that in my life and feed that back into my sadhana to be purified again. See, I think that what we're doing in sadhana, we're seeing ourselves as a Buddha, to use highly metaphorical and problematic terms, but there's Padmasambhava, he's the image of my life. I then imagine myself in this blessed relationship with him, where he pours blessing and love upon me, encourages me to go off and become Padmasambhava. Then I have my day of trying to be Padmasambhava, trying to live out being Padmasambhava. And of course, that's going to fail. So I come and do it in an archetypal way again in the morning. I did try to die again a bit. I try to be reborn a bit and meet Padmasambhava. And then somehow the aim must be, having done that in that way, we then try to live it out during the day. And then we come back to doing it again the next morning. We live it out in the uplifted imagination, and then we have to live it out in history somehow, in the commonplace, in the life that we're actually in. Live out spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, as epitomized by your own sadhana. Everything, I think, is still to think about that, even though we've been talking about it. Not we have, but it's been talked about for so long. Sadhana seems to be an image for what we're trying to do with the whole Dharma life. But yes, I just wanted to sort of say you can sort of stretch and shrink each part of that. But I've definitely needed to bring in a much more strongly a clear spiritual death reflection that's not merely imagining a blue sky. Okay, I think that's pretty much all I need to say. I want to say. Do you want to have a minute or two just to stretch? Let's have a quick leg stretch, and then we'll meditate. Exactly what I want to do. The wrong way around.
It was the right way around.
Oh, was it? Yes. Oh, I see. Cool.
You could give the talk to my friend.
Why is that? None of Archer's teasing me. Okay, so let's set ourselves up for meditation. I'm going to read a poem at the start and at the end. The only thing to say about this poem is worth just knowing that the writer of this poem was a contemporary of Bhante, pretty much, and was writing this in his 90s, just to let you know. Kind of helps. What are you smiling at? It's not Rumi. I'm a Rumi-free zone. Okay, so let's settle. So when you're ready, closing your eyes. As soon as you close your eyes, engaging again with your body, with the Vedana of your body. Again, softening your brow. Softening your eyes. Your jaw. Letting go of your shoulders. Softening your belly. You're really being clear what you're going to do in this meditation. So you might do one of the lakshanas, or you might just sit, or you might try this arc of sadhana where you move from samadhi to prajna reflection and then opening up to the idam in one way or another. But just trying to be a little bit clear about what you're going to do. Ecclesiastes. We must cast our bread upon the waters, as the ancient preacher said, trusting that it may amply be restored to us after many a day. That old metaphor, drawn from rice farming on the river's flooded shore, helps me to believe that it's no great sin to give, hoping to receive. Therefore, I shall throw broken bread this sullen day out across the snow, betting crust and crumb that birds will gather, and that one more spring will come. Ecclesiastes. We must cast our bread upon the waters, as the ancient preacher said, trusting that it may amply be restored to us after many a day. That old metaphor, drawn from rice farming on the river's flooded shore, helps me to believe that it's no great sin to give, hoping to receive. Therefore, I shall throw broken bread this sullen day out across the snow, betting crust and crumb that birds will gather and that one more spring will come. Okay, good. So we'll gather again to hear Yonavarcha talk about the myth of self-discovery and emergence at 7:30 this evening, British summer time. So I'll see you then.